Human takes 3 bullets to save the innocent alien Maid, leaving everyone in shock. The sleek, silver skyscrapers of Nova Proxima pierced the smoggy amber sky. Inside one of the upper suites of the Celestial Oasis Hotel, Ryder Emerson stepped out of the steaming shower, water droplets glistening on his chiseled physique. He ran a hand through his damp chestnut hair and rubbed the stubble shadowing his rugged jawline. Steel blue eyes scanned the room warily. He was so close to completing this mission and getting off this neon-drenched hellhole of a planet. Just had to lay low until his ride showed up at midnight. Avoid drawing attention from the Forvax mercs hunting him. Simple enough. Ryder grabbed a towel, wrapping it around his waist. As he exited the bathroom, he froze. Standing by the rumpled bed was a stunning humanoid female, dressed in the form-fitting charcoal and violet uniform of the hotel staff. Cerulean skin, high cheekbones, full lips parted in surprise. A waterfall of glossy teal hair spilled down her back. Ryder could only stare. The maid, Nixiana, according to her name tag, gawked right back at him, onyx eyes wide. She clearly hadn't expected anyone to be here. Her gaze roved over his bare torso, taking in the defined abs, prominent biceps, jagged scars from old plasma burns. An alluring flush crept up her elegant neck. I'm so sorry, sir, she stammered. I thought the room was vacant. Her voice was melodic, with an exotic lilt. Ryder realized he was still half naked and soaking wet. Real smooth, Emerson. He cleared his throat. No worries, sweetheart. Guess we both got a bit of a shock, huh? He offered a lopsided grin. Nixiana ducked her head shyly, a smile tugging at her lips. I suppose so. I didn't mean to intrude. Her eyes flicked back to his sculpted body before darting away. I can come back later to tidy up. That won't be. The rest of Ryder's words were lost as the door exploded inward in a hail of splintered synthwood. 3 hulking figures in black armor stormed into the room, plasma rifles raised. Forvax assassins. Time seemed to slow. Ryder saw the mercs' fingers tighten on their triggers, the barrels of their weapons swinging toward Nixiana. She stood frozen, eyes wide with terror. In that fraction of a second, Ryder made his choice. No, he roared, launching himself at Nixiana. He slammed into her, knocking her to the floor just as the Forvax opened fire. Searing agony exploded through Ryder's back as 3 plasma bolts meant for Nixiana ripped into him instead. He hit the ground hard, shielding her trembling body with his own. Nixiana screamed, her voice muffled against his chest. Ryder gritted his teeth against the white-hot pain, forcing himself to focus. Had to get her to safety. Had to. Boots thudded closer, a harsh mechanical voice above them. 2 for the price of 1. Lucky us. Ryder tensed, preparing to make a desperate lunge for his blaster. But a sudden cacophony of sirens and shouting erupted from the hallway. The Forvax assassins hesitated. Heavy footfalls and barked orders grew louder, closer. Shit! It's the Nova Proxima Rangers, one of the mercs snarled. We gotta bail. What about Emerson? Leave him. He's dead anyway. The Forvax beat a hasty retreat, their pounding steps fading rapidly. Ryder let out a shuddering breath, his vision blurring at the edges. Nixiana was safe. That was all that mattered. Why? She whispered, her luminous eyes brimming with tears as she stared down at him. Why did you do that? Ryder tried to shrug, but it turned into a wince. Couldn't let a pretty lady like you get shot up on my account now, could I? He attempted a rakish smile, tasting copper on his tongue. Nixiana shook her head in disbelief, teal hair cascading around them like a curtain. Her fingertips brushed his cheek with impossible gentleness. You noble, foolish human. Shouts from the hallway, much closer now. The clatter of combat boots. Ryder's consciousness wavered, darkness encroaching. He fumbled for Nixiana's hand, gripping it weakly. Do me a favor, sweetheart, he rasped. When they ask, tell them I was wearing pants. And with that, Ryder Emerson surrendered to the waiting embrace of oblivion, the faint sound of Nixiana's incredulous laughter chasing him down. Ryder drifted in a haze of pain and confusion, snatches of consciousness filtering through the fog. Blaring sirens, urgent voices, the sensation of movement, a warm, soft hand clasped tightly in his own. Losing a lot of blood. To get him to Nova Proxima General. Stat. Sir, you can't bring her. She's not family. I won't leave him. He saved my life. That voice, musical and pleading. Nixiana. Ryder tried to open his eyes to reassure her, but the darkness dragged him back under. When he surfaced again, it was to the sterile beeping of medical equipment and the astringent tang of antiseptic. Ryder blinked groggily, wincing at the bright fluorescent lights. He was in a hospital bed, swathed in bandages, an IV line snaking from his arm. A gasp from his bedside drew his attention. Nixiana leaned forward in her chair, eyes red-rimmed and shadowed with fatigue, but alight with relief. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Ryder, thank the stars you're awake, she breathed, reaching for his hand. He managed a weak grin. Hey there, gorgeous. You just can't get enough of me, huh? Nixiana let out a watery laugh, shaking her head. You impossible man. You nearly die saving me, and the first thing you do is flirt? Ryder's smile softened. What can I say? I've got my priorities straight. He tried to shift position and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through his torso. Nixiana was on her feet in an instant, hands fluttering over him anxiously. Careful, the doctors said you'll need a lot of rest to heal properly. You're lucky to be alive, you know. Yeah, well, I'm a tough bastard to kill. Ryder studied her drawn features, the worry etched into every line. How long was I out? 3 days, Nixiana replied quietly. The Rangers brought you here after the shooting. I rode with you in the ambulance. I couldn't bear to leave you. Something warm and fierce unfurled in Ryder's chest. He squeezed her hand gently. Thank you for staying with me. Nixiana ducked her head, teal hair falling forward to hide her face. It was the least I could do. You took those shots for me, Ryder. I still can't believe you did that. Hey, I'm a certified hero, didn't you know? Ryder quipped, trying to lighten the mood. I've got a reputation to uphold. She huffed out a laugh but sobered quickly. I mean it, though. Why risk your life for a stranger like that? You could have died. Ryder met her gaze steadily, all traces of humor gone. It was the right thing to do. I couldn't just stand by and watch an innocent person get gunned down. Especially not someone as beautiful and kind as you. Nixiana's eyes widened, a flush staining her blue cheeks. You think I'm beautiful? Sweetheart, you're the most stunning creature I've ever laid eyes on, Ryder said honestly, inside and out. The air between them practically crackled with tension. Nixiana leaned closer, her face mere inches from his. Ryder's heart monitor spiked erratically. He swallowed hard. Just then, the door swished open and a nurse bustled in, shattering the moment. Nixiana sprang back guiltily. The nurse, a matronly Zorgax female, eyed them both with knowing amusement. Glad to see you're finally awake, Mr. Emerson, she said briskly, checking his vitals. Your friend here has hardly left your side. She's been quite the devoted nursemaid. Ryder shot Nixiana a surprised look. She bit her lip, suddenly fascinated by the tiled floor. The nurse chuckled. Now, I know you're eager to get back on your feet, but you sustained some serious injuries. You'll need to take it easy for a while. I'm afraid we'll have to keep you here for at least a week. Ryder groaned dramatically. A week? Come on, Doc, I'm fit as a fiddle. Just slap a bandage on me and I'll be good to go. The nurse snorted. Not on my watch, tough guy. You're staying put until I say otherwise. She turned to Nixiana with a conspiratorial wink. Make sure he behaves himself, dear. I'm counting on you. With that, she swept out of the room, leaving them alone once more. Ryder glanced at Nixiana, quirking an eyebrow. So, a whole week, huh? Whatever will we do to pass the time? Nixiana's eyes sparkled with mischief. Oh, I'm sure we'll think of something. But first, you need to rest. She leaned down and brushed a feather-light kiss across his forehead, her silky hair tickling his skin. Ryder's breath caught. Sweet dreams, my brave human, Nixiana whispered. I'll be right here when you wake up. As she settled back into her chair, Ryder felt a goofy grin spread across his face. Getting shot had never felt so rewarding. The days passed in a blur of healing and stolen moments. True to her word, Nixiana rarely left Ryder's side, tending to him with gentle hands and soft smiles. She helped the nurses change his bandages, brought him meals from the cafeteria, and kept him entertained with stories of her homeworld. Ryder found himself utterly captivated by her, the way her eyes danced when she laughed, The sassy tilt of her chin when she teased him, the graceful sway of her hips as she moved about the room. He drank in every detail, committing them to memory. And if his gaze sometimes lingered on the tantalizing curve of her backside or the plunging neckline of her blouse, well, could anyone blame him? He was only human after all. But it wasn't just physical attraction drawing him to Nixiana. Ryder was fascinated by her quick wit and sharp intellect, the compassionate heart she wore on her sleeve. She made him laugh, made him think, made him feel alive in a way he hadn't in years. Late one night as Nixiana dozed in her chair and Ryder's elderly Kragan roommate snored softly across the room, he found himself watching her sleep. The delicate sweep of her lashes against her cheeks, the gentle rise and fall of her chest. An unfamiliar ache bloomed behind his ribs. What was he doing falling for this girl? He was a soldier, a lone wolf. Attachments were a liability in his line of work. And yet, Nixiana stirred, blinking drowsily up at him. "Ryder, is everything okay?" He smiled, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "Everything's perfect, sweetheart. Go back to sleep." She caught his hand, pressing a kiss to his palm that sent sparks skittering up his arm. Kai. Good night." As she drifted off again, Ryder laced their fingers together, marveling at how perfectly they fit. Maybe, just maybe, he could let himself have this. Let himself hope for something more. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. On the 5th day of Ryder's hospital stay, all hell broke loose. It started with a commotion in the hallway, raised voices and pounding footsteps. Ryder and Nixiana exchanged wary glances. Then the door burst open and a trio of armed Nova Proxima Rangers stormed in, weapons drawn. "Ryder Emerson, you're under arrest for espionage and terrorism," the lead ranger barked. "Come quietly or we'll take you by force." Nixiana leapt to her feet, planting herself between Ryder and the Rangers. "What? That's ridiculous. Ryder's not a spy, he's a hero. He saved my life," the Ranger sneered. "Step aside, miss. This man is a wanted criminal. We have evidence linking him to the Forvax separatists." Ryder's blood ran cold. The Forvax? But that would mean... Nixiana whirled to face him, eyes wide and pleading. "Tell them it's not true, Ryder. Tell them they've got the wrong guy." He opened his mouth, but no words came out. How could he explain? How could he make her understand? The Rangers closed in, yanking him roughly from the bed. Ryder grunted in pain as his stitches pulled. Nixiana cried out, trying to push them away, but they shoved her aside. As they dragged him from the room, Ryder locked eyes with Nixiana one last time. The betrayal and confusion on her face cut him to the core. "I'm sorry," he rasped before the door slammed shut between them. Ryder paced the cramped confines of his cell, mind racing. He'd really stepped in at this time, locked up on some backwater planet, branded a traitor, with no way to contact his handlers back on Earth. And worst of all, he dragged Nixiana into this mess. Sweet, brave Nixiana, who'd saved his sorry hide and stuck by him through everything. Who looked at him like he hung the stars. How could he have let himself get so close to her, knowing the risks? Ryder scrubbed a hand over his face, wincing as his stitches pulled. Stupid, stupid, stupid. He'd broken the cardinal rule of undercover work, never get emotionally involved. But damn if Nixiana hadn't snuck past all his defenses and burrowed straight into his heart. A soft knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. Ryder tensed, expecting another round of interrogation from the Nova Proxima Rangers. But when the door swung open, it was Nixiana who slipped inside, looking pale and determined. "What are you doing here?" Ryder hissed, glancing nervously at the security camera in the corner. "If they catch you..." "I disabled the cameras," Nixiana said, her voice trembling slightly. "Ryder, please, you have to tell me the truth. Are you really a Forvax spy?" Ryder's shoulders slumped. He'd known this moment was coming, but it didn't make it any easier. Taking a deep breath, he met Nixiana's eyes steadily. "No, I'm not a spy, but I am an undercover operative." Nixiana's brow furrowed. "I don't understand." Ryder gestured for her to sit on the narrow bunk beside him. When she did, he took her hands in his, marveling at their delicate strength. "I work for an elite branch of the Terran military," he explained quietly. "We specialize in infiltrating and dismantling terrorist organizations, like the Forvax separatists. I was sent here to gather intel and sabotage their operations from the inside." Nixiana's eyes widened. "So when those assassins attacked us at the hotel, They were my contacts, or at least they were supposed to be. Ryder's jaw clenched. Guess they decided I was more valuable as a scapegoat than an asset. Oh, Ryder, Nixiana's fingers tightened around his. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. He shook his head. I never meant for you to get caught up in all this, and I certainly never meant to lie to you, but I couldn't blow my cover. Too much was at stake. Nixiana was silent for a long moment, her gaze searching his face. Ryder held his breath, bracing for her anger, her disgust. But when she finally spoke, her voice was soft and sad. Do you regret it? Saving me that day? What? No! Ryder cupped her face in his hands, thumbs stroking her silky skin. Nixiana, listen to me. Meeting you, getting to know you. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I don't regret a single moment we've spent together. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Even if it means going to prison, losing everything you've worked for? Ryder smiled ruefully. Sweetheart, I'd take 100 bullets for you. A little jail time is nothing. Nixiana let out a watery laugh, leaning into his touch. You really are the most impossible man. Yeah, but you love me anyway, Ryder teased, before freezing as he realized what he'd said. I mean, that is, But Nixiana just smiled, a slow, sweet curve of her lips that made Ryder's heart stutter in his chest. Yeah, I really do. And then she was kissing him, her mouth soft and urgent against his. Ryder groaned, tangling his fingers in her hair and pulling her closer. He poured everything he couldn't say into that kiss, all his longing and regret and desperate aching love. They broke apart, panting, foreheads pressed together. Nixiana's eyes were dark and glittering in the dim light. We're going to get you out of here, she whispered fiercely. I don't care what it takes. I'm not losing you, Ryder Emerson. Ryder grinned, feeling a wild surge of hope. Well then, gorgeous, what's the plan? As it turned out, the plan involved a daring jailbreak, a stolen hovercraft, and a whole lot of improvisation. Nixiana, it seemed, had hidden depths. She'd managed to slice into the Ranger's security system, looping the camera feeds and disabling the locks on Ryder's cell. They crept through the darkened corridors of the detention center, hearts pounding, hands clasped tightly together. Ryder had to admit, there was something thrilling about being on the run with a beautiful woman at his side, even if said beautiful woman was currently berating him for his recklessness. I can't believe you're grinning like an idiot right now, Nixiana hissed as they ducked into an alcove to avoid a passing patrol. We could be caught at any moment. Ryder just shrugged, still smiling. What can I say? Near-death experiences bring out my charming side. She smacked his arm, but he could see the corners of her mouth twitching. You're impossible. You love it. Stars help me, I really do. They made it out of the building and into the hovercraft bay without incident. Ryder hotwired the nearest vehicle while Nixiana kept watch, her stolen blaster at the ready. As the engine purred to life, Ryder glanced over at her, his heart swelling with pride and affection. Have I mentioned lately how amazing you are? Nixiana flashed him a quick, fierce grin as she swung into the passenger seat. You can thank me later, hotshot. Now, drive! They roared out of the bay and into the neon-soaked streets of Nova Proxima, alarms blaring behind them. Ryder whooped with adrenaline-fueled glee, pushing the hovercraft to its limits. Nixiana clutched at the dashboard, her eyes wide and exhilarated. They wove through traffic, dodging pedestrians and street vendors, the wind whipping through their hair. Ryder felt a mad, reckless joy singing in his veins. This was what he lived for, the rush of danger, the thrill of the chase. And now, with Nixiana by his side, it all felt so much sweeter. As the city lights faded behind them, Ryder reached over and took Nixiana's hand, lacing their fingers together. She squeezed back, her smile soft and radiant in the darkness. They didn't know what the future held, or how they would clear Ryder's name and expose the real traitors. But in that moment, speeding toward the unknown, they had each other. And that was enough. The stolen hovercraft sped through the night, leaving the glittering spires of Nova Proxima far behind. Ryder kept a white-knuckle grip on the controls, his jaw clenched with grim determination. Beside him, Nixiana watched the passing landscape with wide, anxious eyes. They'd been driving for hours, stopping only to ditch the hovercraft and acquire a nondescript ground vehicle from a shady rental agency on the city's outskirts. Ryder had insisted on paying cash, using the emergency funds he'd stashed away for just such an occasion. Now, as the first pale fingers of dawn crept across the horizon, Ryder pulled off the main highway and onto a winding, unpaved road. The vehicle bounced and jostled over the uneven terrain, kicking up clouds of red dust. "Where are we going?" Xaria asked, breaking the tense silence that had settled between them. Ryder glanced over at her, his expression unreadable. "Somewhere safe, or at least somewhere we can lay low for a while and figure out our next move." Xaria frowned, worry creasing her brow. "Ryder, I don't understand. Why can't we just go to the authorities, tell them the truth about what happened? Surely they'll believe us once they see the evidence." He shook his head, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "It's not that simple, sweetheart. The Forvax have eyes and ears everywhere, even in the government. If we surface now, they'll bury us before we can even open our mouths. So what do? Ryder's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "We finish what I started. We take down the Forvax from the inside, cut off the head of the snake. It's the only way to clear my name and keep you safe." Xaria was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but determined. "I'm with you, Ryder. Whatever it takes, we're in this together." Something warm and fierce unfurled in Ryder's chest. He reached over and took Xaria's hand, bringing it to his lips for a gentle kiss. "Together," he echoed, the word a promise. They drove on, the rising sun painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Finally, just as the heat of the day began to build, Ryder turned off the road and into a narrow, hidden canyon. The walls rose up on either side, jagged and imposing, casting deep shadows across the sandy floor. At the end of the canyon, nestled against the base of a towering cliff, was a small, nondescript structure. It looked like little more than a ramshackle shed, its metal walls pitted and rusted, its single window dark and grimy. Ryder brought the vehicle to a stop and killed the engine. He turned to Xaria, his expression serious. "Wait here. I need to make sure it's safe." She nodded, her hand drifting to the blaster at her hip. Ryder felt a swell of pride at her bravery, her unwavering trust in him. He leaned in and kissed her, quick and hard, before slipping out of the car and approaching the shed with cautious steps. He keyed in a complex code on the battered keypad beside the door, holding his breath as he waited for the lock to disengage. With a soft hiss, the door slid open, revealing a dark, musty interior. Ryder stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the gloom. The shed was a far cry from the sleek, high-tech safe houses he was used to, but it would have to do. A single room with a narrow cot against one wall and a workbench cluttered with dusty equipment against the other. A door in the back led to a tiny, cramped bathroom. Ryder did a quick sweep, checking for any signs of disturbance or hidden dangers. Satisfied that the place was secure, he returned to the car and helped Xaria inside, locking the door firmly behind them. She looked around, her nose wrinkling at the stale, dusty air. "Well, it's not the celestial oasis, but I suppose it'll do." Ryder chuckled, pulling her into his arms. "Sorry, sweetheart. Budget cuts. You know how it is." Xaria laughed, the sound bright and warm in the close confines of the shed. She looped her arms around Ryder's neck, her body molding to his. "As long as I'm with you, I don't care where we are." He kissed her then, slow and deep, pouring all his love and gratitude into the press of his lips. Xaria melted against him, her fingers tangling in his hair, her soft curves igniting a fire in his blood. They stumbled back towards the cot, shedding clothes as they went. Ryder's hands roamed over Xaria's silky skin, mapping every dip and curve, committing them to memory. She gasped and arched beneath his touch, her own hands exploring the hard planes of his body with eager reverence. They made love with a desperate, aching tenderness, their bodies moving together in a dance as old as time. Ryder lost himself in the heat of Xaria's embrace, the sweet, perfect fit of her body against his. In that moment, the rest of the universe fell away, and there was only the two of them, bound together by love and need, and the unshakable knowledge that they would face whatever came next as one. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the narrow cot, limbs entwined, hearts beating in sync. Xaria traced idle patterns on Ryder's chest, her touch feather-light and soothing. "What happens now?" she asked softly, her voice heavy with the weight of all that lay ahead. Ryder pressed a kiss to her hair, his arms tightening around her. "Now we rest, gather our strength, and then we start planning." Planning what exactly? He smiled, a fierce, determined curve of his lips. How we're going to infiltrate the Forvax and bring those bastards to their knees. Nixiana propped herself up on one elbow, her eyes searching his face. Ryder, are you sure about this? It's going to be dangerous. If they catch us. They won't, Ryder said firmly. We'll be careful. Smart. We have the element of surprise on our side, and we have each other. That's all we need. She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant and thoughtful. Finally, she nodded, a small, resolute smile tugging at her lips. Okay, let's do it. Let's take those sons of bitches down. Ryder grinned, pride and love and adrenaline surging through his veins. He rolled Nixiana beneath him, capturing her mouth in a searing kiss. She responded with equal fervor, her hands roaming over his back, his shoulders, his sides. They made love again, slower this time, savoring each touch, each gasp, each shuddering wave of pleasure. And as they moved together, skin to skin, heart to heart, Ryder knew with bone-deep certainty that there was nothing in the universe that could stop them, as long as they had each other. The Forvax training camp was a bleak, forbidding place, all harsh angles and cold metal. Ryder and Nixiana stood in line with the other recruits, their faces carefully blank, their postures rigid with feigned obedience. It had taken weeks of careful planning and preparation to get to this point. Forged identities, falsified records, a dizzying array of bribes and favors called in from Ryder's shadowy network of contacts. But finally, they were here, deep in the heart of enemy territory. Ryder risked a glance at Nixiana, standing ramrod straight beside him. Her light blue skin had been darkened with cosmetics, her distinctive teal hair hidden beneath a severe black wig. She looked like a stranger, cold and hard and utterly unlike the warm, vibrant woman he knew. But when her eyes met his, just for a moment, Ryder saw the spark of determination, the unwavering love and trust that burned beneath the surface. It was enough to steady him, to remind him of why they were here and what was at stake. A harsh, grating voice snapped Ryder's attention back to the front of the line. A tall, heavily muscled Forvax with a scarred face and a cruel sneer was pacing back and forth, his beady eyes scanning the assembled recruits with disdain. "Listen up, maggots," he barked, his voice dripping with contempt. "You are here because you have been chosen to serve the glorious cause of the Forvax. You will be trained, tested, and molded into the finest soldiers in the galaxy. You will obey without question, fight without mercy, and die without fear." He paused, his gaze lingering on Ryder for a long, unsettling moment. "And if any of you are found unworthy, if you fail to meet the exacting standards of the Forvax, you will be eliminated, swiftly and without hesitation. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, sir," the recruits chorused, their voices ringing out in perfect unison. The commander nodded, a thin, humorless smile slicing across his face. "Good, now let's begin." What followed was a grueling gauntlet of physical and mental challenges, designed to break the weak and elevate the strong. Ryder and Nixiana were pushed to their limits, their bodies and minds tested in ways they had never imagined. They ran for miles in the blistering heat, weighted packs strapped to their backs. They crawled through mud and barbed wire, dodging live fire and simulated explosions. They sparred with their fellow recruits, trading bruising blows and bone-jarring falls. Through it all, they clung to each other, drawing strength from the unbreakable bond that had brought them this far. In stolen moments between drills, they would exchange glances heavy with meaning, brush fingers in fleeting caresses, whisper words of love and encouragement when no one was listening. At night, they would collapse onto their narrow bunks, bodies aching and minds racing. Ryder would pull Nixiana close, breathing in the scent of her, letting her presence soothe the jagged edges of his thoughts. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," Nixiana confessed one night, her voice barely a whisper in the darkness. "Pretending to be one of them, acting like I believe in their twisted cause. It's eating me up inside." Ryder pressed a kiss to her temple, his arms tightening around her. "I know, sweetheart, but we have to stay strong. We're so close now, I can feel it. Just a little longer, and we'll have what we need to bring these bastards down." Nixiana nodded, burrowing deeper into his embrace. "I trust you, Ryder. With everything I am, I hate seeing you like this, so cold and hard and ruthless. It scares me sometimes, how easily you slip into that role." Ryder's heart clenched, a wave of guilt and self-loathing washing over him. He knew she was right, knew that the persona he had adopted was a far cry from the man he wanted to be, the man he was when he was with her. "It's not real, Nix," he murmured, the old nickname slipping out unbidden. "None of this is. The only thing that's real is you and me and what we have together. Everything else is just noise." She lifted her head, her eyes finding his in the gloom. "Promise me something, Ryder. Promise me that when this is all over, when we've done what we set out to do, promise me that you'll come back to me, the real you, the man I fell in love with." Ryder cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had begun to fall. "I promise, Nixiana, no matter what happens, no matter what I have to do or who I have to become, I will always find my way back to you. You're my home, my heart, my everything." He kissed her then, pouring all his love and devotion into the press of his lips, the slide of his tongue. Nixiana responded with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his hair, her body arching against his. They made love with a desperate, aching intensity, their touches fierce and urgent, their cries muffled against sweat-slick skin. And in the aftermath, as they lay tangled together in the narrow bunk, Ryder felt a renewed sense of purpose, a steely determination to see this through to the end. But even as he held Nixiana close, even as he whispered promises and endearments into her hair, Ryder couldn't shake the growing sense of unease that had begun to take root in his gut. There was something off about this place, something that went beyond the usual brutality and fanaticism of the Forvax. Whispers in the shadows, furtive glances exchanged between the higher-ups, a pervasive air of secrecy and paranoia that set Ryder's teeth on edge. And then there were the disappearances, recruits who vanished in the night, never to be seen again, instructors who went off on mysterious assignments and never returned. It was as if the Forvax were slowly, methodically culling their own ranks, weeding out the unworthy in some twisted, inscrutable game. Ryder knew he had to get to the bottom of it, had to uncover the truth before it was too late. But the deeper he dug, the more dangerous the game became. And with each passing day, each new horror unveiled. He couldn't shake the sinking feeling that he and Nixiana had stumbled into something far bigger, far more insidious than they had ever imagined. As he drifted off to sleep, Nixiana's warm weight pressed against his side, Ryder sent up a silent prayer to whatever gods might be listening. A prayer for strength, for guidance, for the power to protect the woman he loved and the cause they had sworn to serve. For he knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that the true test was still to come, and when it did, he would be ready. For Nixiana, for justice, for the future they dreamed of building together. No matter the cost, the evidence was damning, a tangled web of encrypted files and covert communications that pointed to a traitor in their midst. Ryder and Nixiana huddled over the stolen datapad, their faces drawn and tense in the harsh glow of the screen. "I can't believe it," Nixiana whispered, her voice thick with shock and betrayal. "All this time, someone's been working against us from the inside, feeding information to the enemy, sabotaging our efforts." Ryder nodded grimly, his jaw clenched with barely contained fury. And not just anyone, someone high up in the ranks, someone with access to top-level intel and resources. They had stumbled upon the evidence by chance, a stray data packet intercepted during a routine communications drill. At first, Ryder had dismissed it as a glitch, a random string of gibberish, but something about it had nagged at him, a niggling sense of wrongness that he couldn't shake. So he had dug deeper, enlisting Nixiana's help to decrypt the message and trace its origins. And what they had found had shaken them to their core. The mole was clever, their tracks well covered, and their identity fiercely guarded. But there were patterns, tells, little inconsistencies that began to add up over time. A mission that went sideways at the last minute, an ambush that seemed just a little too well planned. Ryder and Nixiana had worked tirelessly to unravel the clues, stealing moments between training sessions and lights out to pore over the data, to piece together the puzzle one fragment at a time. And now, after weeks of painstaking effort, they had a name, a face, a target. Commander Zaxxon, the scarred, cruel-eyed Forvax who had overseen their training from the start, the one who had singled out Ryder from the beginning, watching him with a cold, calculating gaze that had made his skin crawl. It made a twisted sort of sense, Ryder thought bitterly. Who better to orchestrate the Forvax's some most heinous acts then the man tasked with molding their soldiers, with shaping their very minds and souls. But even as the pieces fell into place, even as the truth stared them in the face, Ryder and Nixiana knew that their work was far from over. Knowing the identity of the mole was one thing. Proving it and using that knowledge to bring the Forvax to their knees was another matter entirely entirely. They would have to be careful, Ryder knew, would have to play the long game, gather evidence and build a case brick by painstaking brick. One wrong move, one misstep, and they would be exposed, their cover blown and their lives forfeit. But they had no choice. The stakes were too high, the cost of failure too great to contemplate. And so, with grim determination and a fierce, unshakable love, Ryder and Nixiana set to work. They began to shadow Zaxxon, watching his every move with a hawk-like intensity. They bugged his quarters, hacked his communications, tracked his comings and goings with a relentless, single-minded focus. And slowly, piece by piece, the puzzle began to take shape. They uncovered encrypted transmissions to shadowy figures on far-flung worlds, bank accounts swollen with illicit funds, a network of spies and saboteurs that stretched across the galaxy. It was a dizzying, sickening tapestry of corruption and deceit, a cancer that had eaten away at the very heart of the Forvax for years, perhaps decades. And at its center, pulling the strings like a demented puppet master, was Zaxxon. But even as they marveled at the scope of his betrayal, even as they reeled from the implications of what they had uncovered, Ryder and Nixiana knew that they couldn't afford to lose focus, couldn't afford to let their guard down for even a moment. Because the Zaxxon was watching them too, Ryder could feel it in the prickling at the back of his neck, the cold, crawling sensation of eyes on his back. The commander was no fool, and he had not risen to his position by being careless or complacent. He knew that something was amiss, that the delicate balance of power within the Forvax was shifting beneath his feet, and he would stop at nothing to maintain his grip, to crush any threat to his authority with ruthless, unflinching brutality. It all came to a head on a cold, moonless night, as Ryder and Nixiana huddled together in the shadows of the training ground, poring over their latest batch of stolen intel. They were so engrossed in their work, so lost in the labyrinthine twists and turns of Zaxxon's schemes, that they almost didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. But some sixth sense, some primal instinct honed by months of constant danger, made Ryder look up just in time to see the figure looming over them, a blaster leveled at their hearts. "Well, well, well," Zaxxon drawled, his voice dripping with malice and dark amusement. "What have we here? A pair of little spies sticking their noses where they don't belong?" Ryder and Nixiana scrambled to their feet, their own weapons drawn and ready. But they were outnumbered and outflanked, surrounded by a ring of heavily armed Forvax soldiers who seemed to melt out of the darkness like wraiths. "It's over, Zaxxon," Ryder growled, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "We know everything. Your days of betrayal and treachery are finished." The commander laughed, a harsh, grating sound that sent shivers down Ryder's spine. "Oh, you poor, deluded fool. You think you know everything? You don't know the half of it." He gestured to one of his men, who stepped forward and handed him a small, innocuous-looking device. Zaxxon held it up, his eyes glittering with a mad, feverish light. "Do you know what this is, human? This is the key to the Forvax's ultimate triumph, the weapon that will bring the galaxy to its knees and usher in a new era of order and control." Ryder's blood ran cold, a sickening realization dawning in the pit of his stomach. "The doomsday device," he whispered, the words like ashes on his tongue. "The one from the rumors, the one they said was just a myth." Zaxxon's smile was a sharp, predatory thing, all teeth and malice. "Oh, it's no myth, boy. It's very, very real. And thanks to your bumbling efforts to uncover my little operation, you've led me right to the final piece of the puzzle." He tapped a command into the device, and a holographic display sprang to life, a swirling vortex of light and color that coalesced into a familiar shape. A planet, green and blue and achingly beautiful, spinning serenely in the void. "Earth," Nixiana breathed, her voice trembling with horror and disbelief. "You're going to target Earth." Zaxxon's laughter was a thing of nightmares, cold and cruel and utterly, utterly mad. "Not just Earth, my dear. Every human colony, every outpost, every last miserable mudball your kind has infested. The Forvax will scour them from the face of the galaxy, and from the ashes we will build a new order, a perfect society free from the taint of human weakness and sentimentality." Ryder's mind raced, desperate for a way out, for some glimmer of hope in the darkness. But there was none. They were trapped, outgunned, and outmaneuvered, with no way to stop the horror that was about to unfold. And then, in a blinding flash of clarity, he knew what he had to do. The only thing he could do, the only choice that mattered. He looked at Nixiana, his heart in his eyes, his soul laid bare. "I love you," he whispered, the words a fierce, unshakable vow. "No matter what happens, no matter what comes next, I will always love you." And then, before she could respond, before the tears that shimmered in her eyes could fall, he turned to face Zaxxon, his blaster raised and ready. "You want the final piece of the puzzle, you son of a bitch?" he snarled, his voice raw with rage and desperation. "Come and get it." And with a roar of defiance, a battle cry that echoed through the ages, Ryder Emerson charged forward into the jaws of death in the heart of the inferno, ready to face his fate and save the woman he loved, the worlds he called home, the future he had dreamed of for so long. No matter the cost, the battle was a maelstrom of fire and blood, a desperate, furious clash of wills and weapons. Ryder fought like a man possessed, his blaster spitting death and destruction, his body a whirlwind of motion and power. He could feel Nixiana at his back, her own weapon blazing, her presence a fierce, unyielding anchor in the chaos. Together they carved a path through the Forvax forces, a trail of broken bodies and shattered dreams. But for every soldier they felled, for every inch of ground they gained, it seemed that two more rose to take their place. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and rapidly running out of time. Zaxxon stood at the center of it all, his face a mask of twisted glee, the doomsday device clutched in his clawed hands. He was laughing, a high, mad cackle that sent shivers down Ryder's spine. "You cannot win, human," he crowed, his voice a razor-edged snarl. "The device is armed, the countdown begun. In mere moments, your pathetic species will be nothing more than a memory, a footnote in the glorious history of the Forvax." Ryder gritted his teeth, a swell of rage and desperation rising in his chest. He couldn't let it end like this, couldn't let all their sacrifices, all their struggles, be for nothing. With a roar of defiance, he lunged forward, his blaster forgotten, his hands reaching for the device. Zaxxon reacted with inhuman speed, his own weapon coming up to bear, a searing bolt of energy slicing through the air. Ryder felt the impact like a sledgehammer to the chest, a white-hot agony that drove the breath from his lungs and sent him tumbling to the ground. He heard Nixiana scream his name, heard the fury and anguish in her voice, but it seemed to come from a great distance, muffled by the roaring in his ears. Through a haze of pain, he saw Zaxxon standing over him, the doomsday device held aloft like a trophy, a mad, triumphant grin splitting his face. "And so it ends," the Forvax commander sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "The great Ryder Emerson, the savior of the galaxy, brought low by a single shot. How pathetic." Ryder coughed, tasting blood on his lips, feeling the cold, creeping numbness spreading through his limbs. But even as his vision blurred and his strength faded, he managed a weak, defiant grin. "You think? You've won?" he rasped, his voice a hoarse, painful whisper. "You think this is the end?" Zaxxon's eyes narrowed, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. "What are you babbling about, human? You're finished. Your worlds are doomed. What could you possibly—" But before he could finish, before he could even react, Ryder was moving, a final, desperate surge of strength propelling him forward. His hands closed around the doomsday device, wrenching it from Zaxxon's grasp with a cry of triumph and despair. The Forvax commander howled in rage, his claws scrabbling for purchase, but Ryder was too quick, too determined. With a final, wrenching twist, he tore the device free, sending Zaxxon stumbling back, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. "No!" he screamed, his voice a high, keening wail. "No, you can't! You'll ruin everything!" But Ryder wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on Nixiana, his face a mask of love and regret. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice a fierce, unshakable vow. "I'm so sorry, Nix, but I have to do this. I have to save you, save everyone. It's the only way." And then with a final, anguished cry, he brought the device down on his knee, shattering it into 1,000 glittering pieces. The world seemed to hold its breath, a moment of perfect, crystalline silence. And then, With a roar of sound and fury, the doomsday device exploded, a blinding flash of light and heat that consumed everything in its path. Ryder felt himself lifted off his feet, felt the searing, blistering agony of the blast wash over him like a tidal wave. He heard Zaxxon's final, despairing scream, heard the cries of the Forvax soldiers as they were engulfed in the inferno. And then, mercifully, he felt nothing at all. When Ryder opened his eyes, he was sure he was dead. The world around him was a haze of white, a featureless void that seemed to stretch on forever. He blinked, trying to clear his vision, trying to make sense of his surroundings. And then, slowly, painfully, the world began to take shape. He was lying in a bed, a soft, comfortable bed with crisp, clean sheets and a fluffy pillow beneath his head. The walls around him were a soothing shade of pale blue, the air filled with the gentle beeping of medical equipment. A hospital, he realized dimly. He was in a hospital, and then like a thunderbolt from a clear sky, the memories came rushing back. The battle, the doomsday device, his final, desperate act of sacrifice. "Nixiana!" he cried, his voice a hoarse, ragged gasp. He tried to sit up, tried to swing his legs over the side of the bed, but a gentle hand on his shoulder stopped him. "Easy there, hotshot," a familiar voice said, warm and teasing, and achingly, wonderfully real. "You're in no condition to be going anywhere just yet." Ryder's heart leapt, his eyes widening in disbelief and wonder. "Nix," he whispered, hardly daring to hope. Is that really you?" And then she was there, leaning over him, her face a mask of tears and laughter and pure, unbridled joy. "Of course it's me, you big dummy," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Who else would put up with your reckless, heroic antics?" Ryder reached up, his hand trembling as he cupped her cheek, feeling the warmth of her skin, the softness of her hair. But how?" he asked, his mind reeling with questions. "The device, the explosion. I thought..." Nixiana shook her head, a wry, tearful smile tugging at her lips. "You thought wrong, Ryder Emerson. You should know by now that it takes more than a little doomsday device to keep you down." She leaned in closer, her forehead touching his, her breath warm and sweet against his face. "You managed to activate the device's failsafe just before it blew. It contained the blast, channeled the energy inward instead of outward. Zaxxon and his goons got the worst of it, but you made it out alive. Barely." Ryder let out a shuddering breath, a sob of relief and gratitude and pure, overwhelming love. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. I thought I'd never see you again." Nixiana kissed him then, a soft, gentle brush of lips that somehow conveyed everything she couldn't say. Everything she felt. "You'll never lose me, Ryder," she murmured, her eyes shining with tears and promise. "Not in this life, not in any other. I'm yours, now and forever." They held each other then, lost in the miracle of their survival, in the sheer, unimaginable joy of being alive and together and whole. The road ahead would be long and hard, Ryder knew, the scars of their ordeal not easily forgotten, but as he looked into Nixiana's eyes, as he felt the strength and love and unbreakable bond that flowed between them, he knew that they could face anything, overcome anything, as long as they had each other. And so, with a final, grateful kiss, Ryder Emerson and Nixiana Starfire began their new life together. A life of adventure and laughter and endless, boundless love. A life where the impossible became possible, where the unimaginable became reality, and where the power of the human spirit, the strength of the human heart, could conquer even the darkest of foes and the direst of circumstances. For they had each other, now and always. And in the end, that was all that mattered. The sun was setting over the lush, verdant hills of Nova Proxima, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Ryder and Nixiana sat together on the porch of their little cottage, watching the day fade into night, their hands entwined and their hearts full. It had been a year since the final battle with the Forvax, a year of healing and growth and new beginnings. They had both left their old lives behind, trading the chaos and danger of the front lines for the peace and simplicity of a quiet rural existence. Ryder had taken up woodworking, crafting beautiful, intricate pieces that he sold at the local market. Nixiana had discovered a talent for gardening, coaxing lush, vibrant blooms from the rich, fertile soil. They spent their days in simple, honest work, their nights in each other's arms, lost in the warmth and comfort of their love. And though the memories of their trials and tribulations still lingered, though the scars of their battles still ached from time to time, they knew that they had each other, now and always. As the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, Ryder turned to Nixiana, his eyes soft and full of wonder. "I never thought I could have this," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "A home, a life, a love like ours. I never thought I deserved it." Nixiana smiled, her hand coming up to caress his cheek, her touch gentle and full of understanding. "You deserve everything, Ryder Emerson," she said firmly, her voice ringing with conviction. "You're a hero, a warrior, a man of courage and honor and unshakable goodness. And I am so lucky to be yours." Ryder kissed her then, a deep, passionate kiss that said everything he couldn't put into words. And as they lost themselves in each other, as they reveled in the simple, perfect joy of their love, they knew that they had found their place in the universe, their purpose in their peace. For they were Ryder and Nixiana, the human and the alien, the soldier and the maid, the lovers and the dreamers. And together they could face anything, overcome anything, and build a future as bright and boundless as the stars themselves.